I'm just delighted to welcome you this morning to our special event webinar on continuing professional development. This is going to be a great overview. I'm really looking forward to it in terms of how we as professionals can keep our certification current once we become CMCs. We are joined today by Jon Pascoe. He's the Chair of Professional Development for CMC-GI and has a long history as a CMC in terms of leading initiatives within IMCs, with CMC Canada in particular, where he was the registrar of the Alberta Institute and has been involved in many ways in terms of improving the Institute in Canada. My name is Dwight Mahalitz. I'm the past chair of CMC Global Institute, and I'm your chair for today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Jon and welcome him to this special event webinar. Thank you very much for the preparation that has gone into this, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us today. I will operate the slides for you, so anytime you're ready for me to move forward one, just say next slide please, and we'll click right on.
Thank you for inviting me to speak with all of the CMC Global Institute members. Perhaps if we can just, by way of context, Dwight, talk a bit about the CMC Global Institute, and it will assist members to understand where professional development fits in relative to the CMC-GI. So if you're able to speak a bit about the CMC-GI's reach and mission, vision, so forth, that would really set the stage.
Excellent, excellent. I saw that slide in here, and I'm absolutely happy to address it. The really exciting thing about the CMC Global Institute is the huge disparity that we have in terms of geographical coverage, the degrees of professionalism, the different types of practices that are out there, the geographical boundaries, the cultural differences. So if you look at this map, you'll see that CMC Global is the parent organization of 49 different IMCs around the world. So everywhere where you see a global, that's a geographical area where there's one IMC, which is accountable for the membership of management consultants in that territory and for certifying them. But there's a lot of white spaces on that map, and the white spaces represent those areas where there isn't an IMC. So that's where we, as CMC Global, one of the 49 members, CMC Global Institute, sorry, one of the 49 members of CMC Global, comes to bear in terms of being that home institute for management consultants, wherever in the world they may be, if there isn't a home institute. You'll see two areas that are in blue on this map. They're kind of hard to see. They're small, but we have Moldova and United Arab Emirates, where we have 3 CMCs registered in each of those 2 countries. So whenever we have a country with more than 3 CMCs, as we grow, we will be coloring that space in blue. So our goal is to turn the white into blue, and then ultimately to have a gold map with institutes in every country of the world.
Great. We'll just go on to the next slide in terms of mission and vision and so on, and then into professional development.
Excellent. So in terms of the mission, we're really focused in terms of the elevation of the standards of management consulting in countries that aren't served, which I've mentioned already. But the key here is that management consultants, wherever in the world they are, through CMC Global Institute or through CMC Global, if there is an institute in their country, are advancing the profession. So what we want to do is ensure that as management consultants, we are part of a global profession that adheres to the same code of conduct. We work to the same knowledge base, and we have this ability to share and network amongst each other around the world. In terms of our strategic objectives, we want to establish and build value for the CMC designation so that it has a very particular meaning right around the world. We want to develop this base of management consulting members. We want to provide professional development opportunities, which this session is all about, so that as management consultants we can continue to improve ourselves and our practices, and then we want to establish effective and efficient organizations that are working internationally. So as an international association, our members can work together.
Great. With that kind of context, let's pause for a moment and speak about why continuing professional development is important. And this is really more than CMC Global Institute. This is really to all professional associations. Very, very few professional associations that offer designations now do not require, so almost all require some form of continuing professional development. It's mandatory, and there are a certain number of points attained. Have to get a certain number of points per year or per renewal cycle, which might be 3 years. The CMC Global Institute process that we're going to be talking about is by no means unique. And in fact, we've modeled it on what's being done with other CMC institutes and other professional development programs. So in terms of the next slide, some points for you as far as why professional development is important. Attaining the CMC designation means meeting worldwide standards in terms of competency, ethics, practice standards, and the ability to consult independently. And it's really important to understand that gaining a CMC in any of the Institutes of Management Consulting, including the CMC Global Institute, presumes that you can carry that CMC designation with you to other institutes. So when it says worldwide competent, world-class competence, ethics, practice standards, gaining a CMC through Global Institute is really no different than Europe, United States, Canada, and elsewhere. And there's a presumption that is portable among countries, among provinces, and among states. As I mentioned before, almost all professions obligate recertification. It'd be very hard-pressed to find any. In the old days, it used to be just gain the entry-level designation, and then essentially you're good to go for the remainder of your career until, or if and when you become involved in discipline. That's changed over the past probably 10, 15 years, where now almost all professions obligate recertification. And it's a career-long commitment to maintaining the highest competency standards by comparison to getting in the door, and then you're essentially good to go. In the next slide, some other major reasons. We in CMC Global Institute and other institutes of management consulting believe that an individual, a member who has been engaging in continuing professional development better serves our clients in the profession because they are essentially current in practice, or they are far more current in practice by comparison to by way of example, somebody who gained the designation 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago and has not participated in any professional development. That would be the same as seeing a physician, a dentist, an architect, a lawyer, something along professions along those lines who have not been involved in professional development. You can certainly see that it would be, in all likelihood, a better outcome to visit with a professional who is current in practice. One of the other reasons for being involved in continuing professional development is lowering the likelihood of client complaints and allegations of unprofessional conduct. On this slide, you can get a sense in terms of the many challenges CMC-GI has with respect to the international nature, back to the map that Dwight presented, the international nature of our membership group. Not that other institutes of management consulting don't have their challenges, but this will give you an idea of some of the challenges and opportunities that come with a truly international membership, with many members sprinkled over a great number of countries, and with the understanding, of course, when you read it into context, what Dwight has said, once they reach a certain critical mass, a certain number, and are able to function on their own, they spin off and then become their own Institute of Management Consulting. So it gives you some sense in terms of the UAE, which is beginning to get to the point of being self-sufficient. Moldova, similarly, Mongolia, Palestine, Sudan, Egypt, Botswana, Costa Rica, Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia, St. Lucia. It gives you a sense in terms of the diversity of our membership and some of the opportunities that come with trying to reach out to such far-flung membership. Language, of course, many members don't speak English, and so this is certainly an opportunity for translators, particularly in Russian. Many of these countries are former USSR, are formerly of the USSR, and elsewhere in terms of being able to impart the knowledge necessary to gain the CMC, to take the qualifying examination, and also to be involved in continued professional development in other than English. It's not particularly easy to deliver courses cost effectively. There's much that occurs behind the scenes in terms of arriving at the overall enrollment price. There's a lot of development and research and marketing, international money transfers, administration, so forth, that actually go into the price of the courses. We certainly attempt as best as possible to cost them minimally, because we recognize that this can be a bit of a burden. Thanks to technology on the positive side, when we wouldn't be having this conversation 10, 15, 20 years ago, distance online education has been considerably perfected over the years, to the point now where time zone changes aside, it's actually quite effective and efficient to be able to deliver distance education, including mandatory courses, which we'll be speaking about in a moment, through the internet. And lastly, in terms of some of the opportunities, meeting recertification requirements for those of you who are CMCs, and for those of you curious about what it's going to be like once you are CMCs, you'll be aware that our registrar, on behalf of the board, just released the recertification requirements, and you'll see that you need a certain number of points, continuing professional development points per year, as well as every 3 years to regain, to recertify, to maintain your certification. And those can be gained primarily through continuing education, but also through experience, through attendance at conferences and those kinds of things. So there are many, many ways to go about doing it, and we're certainly understanding of the fact that it's tougher with our diverse geography to do that sort of thing by comparison to in some of the more established countries. The next slide. We'll be saying more in the coming weeks and months about 2 mandatory courses. The board decided back, excuse me, in June 2018, that ensuring that all members have a foundation in the principle of ethics conduct is so very important, and distinguishes certified management consultants from quote-unquote management consultants and others, that all members, whether they be prospective CMCs or have attained the CMCs, must take an ethics course as approved by the board of directors and the registrar. The one that we have ready to go for now in November is called the Principles of Ethical Conduct. And it gives you a sense in terms of that this is not the way we've developed this program. It's not kind of dry, read the code and the interpretation guidelines and have a bit of a discussion about what they're all about. This is really, like the others, an informative, interactive, quite eye-opening course in terms of what are some of the real business issues that as said in the on this slide, that trigger that kind of gut feeling that something just isn't right, and there's a need to further reflect upon it, to consult the CMC Code of Professional Conduct, to speak with your peers, to kind of maneuver your way through it. If there is a conflict of interest, to declare it and to manage it. If the conflict of interest is just so significant to decline the assignment. This is a very, very well-reviewed course. It's offered by most every institute across the country and the world. And it's a course that we believe you can really have fun at on the basis of literally hundreds of reviews. You can really have fun at while you're learning important material. So, so as to kind of dispel any concerns you might have that it's dry and uninteresting and irrelevant, we really gone the extra mile with a first-class, internationally renowned trainer to deliver a useful, productive, and insightful course. So we want to remind all members, whether they be prospective or CMCs, that they're going to be needing to take the ethics course, the approved ethics course, by June of 2018. On the next slide, for those of you who are pursuing the CMC designation, there is a significantly longer course for those who aspire, as I mentioned, to take the CMC course and pursue the designation. There's a considerably longer, it's a 5-step or a 5-session course offered over about 3 months or so. And that gets really into the basics of the consulting process, the tools and techniques, how, as you can see from the slide, human resources, strategic planning, finance, operations, information technology, marketing all come together. This course actually, in addition to aspiring CMCs, has been very well reviewed by those who are quite senior, who may have gained their CMC 5, 10, 20 years ago. Some of the reviews that are actually quite surprising in terms of yes, I've been in the business a long time, and it's been absolutely excellent to gain a refresher. So on the next slide, you can see some of the topics about teamwork and the familiar forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning, some of the various tools and techniques, how to communicate properly with clients. These are the kinds of things that often we take for granted, but it's really good to be provided with best class examples across the world, to actually develop a presentation, to simulate meeting with clients, to preparing reports. There's certainly a major emphasis on change management and some of the tools and techniques, which of course is at the heart of pretty much every management consulting assignment. On the next slide, we'll give you a sense in terms of, because I'll be asking for, we will be asking for your input in a few minutes. We'll give you a sense in terms of the kinds of courses that you identified when a survey went out in July of 2017, which basically said, over and above the mandatory ethics course and the essentials fundamentals course, what are the kinds of courses that you'd like us to see developing and delivering by distance? And this gives you a sense in terms of the results that came back. A high degree of interest in the new ISO, International Standards Organization, management consulting standards that have obviously implications for CMC standards. Certainly much interest in project management. How do I negotiate a contract? How do I negotiate deliverables with clients? How do I negotiate to a successful conclusion of a consulting assignment? Personal and interpersonal competencies and communication. How do I provide effective change management services? Of course, mentoring, coaching, and knowledge transfer is actually far more formal than it might seem. Managing, it's kind of appropriate to today's session, managing teams virtually as opposed to in the same room. And how do I market my professional services? So this gives you a sense of the inventory, the kind of courses that we're really keen in the next couple, 3 years to be able to deliver, probably starting with the ISO standards in project management. So in the next slide, on behalf of one of the committee members, I just wanted to give you a sense in terms of the, we'll skim through these slides fairly quickly. I wanted to give you a sense in terms of the kinds of subject matter expert groups and peer organizations within the CMC Global Institute for members like you to be able to consider and certainly be involved in and really add value, we hope, to your membership. So here's an example of one that's being considered right now and is ready to go and would encourage membership in, and that is best practices and projects. So let's just skim through and see what this is all about. On the next slide, you can see that it's designed, it's a virtual group, like all groups with the CMC Global Institute, designed to share information about types of projects, methodologies, tools, and case examples. And this can really be very powerful because, of course, the majority of us, whether we be volunteers for the CMC Global Institute or members, the majority are not members of large firms with big professional development departments and so forth. Many of us work on our own. It can be really professionally quite isolating. It would be just absolutely excellent to be able to consult with peers about projects and methodologies and tools and case examples. So that's the concept behind it. Excuse me. In the next slide, you can see that it's intended as a closed group where you actually have to be admitted, and the admission criteria are not steep. Obviously, being a member of CMC-GI is the first step. So you request membership through the CMC-GI Secretariat, who validates it, and then there's a need to sign the NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, follow certain minimal rules, and be bound by a declaration of compliance with the engagement. And we'll talk about that in a moment. On our next slide, you can see that some of the possibilities here, the possibilities really are endless, open to discussion on topics like analytics and organization design and methodology and use of tools and topics. And so if you have a look at the detail on this slide, it just gives you a sense in terms of some of the topics that can be discussed in essentially a closed, comfortable, safe group where you can bandy around ideas with people from all over the world who can provide you with great insights that again, are very difficult to be able to obtain when you're working in a relatively isolated setting. So when you have a look at this rather busy slide, but it's really quite interesting in terms of change management for robotics. That's not something that many of us would know about. Process improvements in back office operations, automation methodology, and those kinds of things. So really, really intriguing possibilities, and certainly would encourage all of those in the audience today, as well as those who might be listening to recording, to consider this first-rate peer group. The next slide, you can see that there are modest prerequisites in terms of joining the best practices in peer group, needing to be a member, needing to have recertification up to date, signing a non-disclosure agreement or confidentiality agreement, and signing a declaration of compliance with the engagement rules. So that the prerequisites are hopefully relatively modest, but the idea is, of course, that confidentiality in peer discussions are most important. And the next slide, the intent is that every group would meet, the intent is that this group would meet every month, prepare an agenda, be relatively self-sufficient, and certainly you can say as much or as little as you want about your organization or the problems that you face. The content would need to be in English or translated. And perhaps most importantly, for the purpose of today's session, contributors would earn recertification points for volunteering. So this gives you a sense of some of the agenda items. And again, it's quite exciting in terms of being really self-managing as opposed to being something formally developed and being delivered. So we really, on the next slide, encourage you to show your interest, to let the Secretariat know, to proceed with the validation of your application. And you can see that there's a process on this slide through to being accepted. On the next slide, you can see that there's a need to do a bit of paperwork. And on the next slide to indicate the kind of topics that you're interested in, perhaps most importantly, what you can contribute to. Time zones are really quite interesting. On today's call, we have everything from early morning to probably late in the evening. And your availability. So you can see it's relatively easy. In the next slide, some kickoff dates. And for those in the IT world, you can see that the possibility of doing sessions on internet tools, on even for those who are non-IT, on strategic planning and so forth. So basically something every month that's really driven by the members, as opposed to coming from the formal organization. So in closing on this section of the presentation, on behalf of Otto Acuna, who's done an enormous amount of work to get this group up and running, very strongly encourage you to be involved in the best practices and peer group. The next slide is an opportunity to seek your input about what you would see being important with continuing professional development. So would ask you to let us know what continuing professional development topics are important to you. What value is there for you? So other than the membership requirement for certification or recertification, what value is there for you in continuing professional development? We have really worked long and hard at attempting to overcome barriers to offering relevant, cost-effective, and current continuing professional development. If you harken back to the slides, the earlier slide that I mentioned in terms of some of the topics that were identified in the survey, are there other topics you'd like to see covered in course offerings? And we will do our best to customize and tailor them to your specifications. And in another sense, how can the CMC Global Institute best meet your needs? So interested in questions from those who are participating in terms of these 5 identified areas. What sort of topics are most important to you, and what sort of value is there in it for you? So I'll turn this over now to Dwight, who will work the microphones and so on to allow those on the call to pose questions. There are no right or wrong answers, but we are most sincerely interested in your input. So I would encourage you to let us know what best meets your needs.
Thank you very much, John. That was an amazing overview. I really liked your point about us being a global organization, and that brings with it many challenges, but also many opportunities. And I agree with that, because in spite of the fact that it's hard to communicate sometimes because of time zones, because of different languages, because of different ways of doing things, at the end of the day, all of us as professionals can learn from each other. And to me, in terms of my experience with CMC Global and with GI, it's been absolutely amazing what I've been able to take away from all of these meetings. So I would like to open it up now for those of you that are on the line. Any comments you have for John? Any questions that you might have, or any suggestions that you have that from your perspective would be a great direction for professional development, so that he and his committee can be working in that direction. So so please, anyone that would like to speak now, just unmute yourself, and I'd love to take some questions from you.
So probably best to begin by reinforcing what came of the survey, and that is ISO standards, project management, negotiation, personal interpersonal competencies, change management, mentoring, coaching, managing virtual teams, marketing, professional services. What are some of the areas that you would really like to see us cover? We're volunteers acting on your behalf. What are some of the areas that perhaps were identified in this fall's questionnaire or not, as Dwight mentioned, over to you to let us know what you believe to be priority areas.
Perhaps while you're thinking, I'll just bring that that other slide back up so that we can see
Sure.
that.
Hi, John. It's Harold. I'm thinking that for a lot of consultants, one of their biggest challenges is not so much in the delivery of projects, but more in the sales and marketing area, and making sure that they have a sufficient pipeline to actually keep themselves alive. And, you know, there's lots of things you can do around the marketing area, which is endless. And really only limited by your own imagination, but clearly some things have a greater impact and return on investment than other things might. I think most people can probably deal with the sales part, but how do you get enough stuff into the top of the funnel, and what's the best bang for the dollar? So that might be a possible topic that would interest a lot of people.
Excellent idea in terms of for those who are new to the profession, right through to those who've been doing it for decades. This is something that does sales, marketing, networking, and so on are areas that don't necessarily come easily. I think all of us encounter a bit of a trap in terms of working very, very heavily on behalf of a particular project, and quote unquote just don't have the time to pursue others. So you know, back to your concept of a pipeline, if and when that very, very busy consulting assignment concludes, we want to attempt to avoid the feast or famine cycle that I think all consultants experience at some stage of the game. So as it relates to potential additional courses, very definitely we would want to be doing something on sales and marketing and networking. We wouldn't want you to be left with the impression that we have a particular agenda in terms of necessarily project management and ISO standards and being really kind of dry and detailed and formal. Certainly sales and marketing and networking and kind of the softer skills of practice management are every bit as important to a successful consulting practice. So that's a really good idea. And I'm thinking that we would want to probably put that among the top 3 or 4 that we're wanting to pursue. Are there any other ideas? Back to Dwight. Are there any other ideas from members?
Just on that one, because I really like that idea of marketing. And the other one, I reinforce your point, John, that this has to do as much with sharing expertise as it does coming up with some magic formula, which typically doesn't exist in any of these things. And the other part where we have varied experiences around social marketing, so it might be very interesting for us to have some sessions where we can explore what works and what doesn't work, and how we can leverage each other's experiences in that way.
Excellent suggestion. Social marketing for many of us is a bit of a mystery, and to be gently coached and counseled and taught by those who know it well would really be a relief by comparison to as a management consultant. I just wouldn't know even where to start if I couldn't approach my own Institute of Management Consulting. I just wouldn't know where to start to gain those kind of skills that are not too little, not too much relative to what my needs are, and so far to learn it from my peers in a safe environment, in a somewhat structured and safe environment, by comparison to how do you go about learning except trial and error, and that's not a good way to proceed.
Yeah. The other concept that you came up with, John, was which we haven't talked about today, but might be of interest to members. By the way, I am texting with people on the call, and for the most part, they're saying that the direction is right and don't have anything specific to add. But it is open if anyone would like to say anything. The concept that you raised, the idea you had, was around special webinars, which are in this format. They might be 1 to 2 hours long, so fairly focused, but where different members or board members or committee members of GI might share their methodology or parts of it that they would like to do as a special interest webinar for points for our recertification. Perhaps you might like to talk about that a bit.
I think it's important to emphasize that putting on an hour or two webinar on an area of special interest. So, for example, somebody has expertise in information technology, the best practices group that we just spoke about, maybe doing a presentation on human resources and business process reengineering and so forth. I think, as we're all aware, an hour or two presentation probably obligates up to 6, 8, 10 times the amount of input for it to be effective. It's, for a few of us, it's just simply a function of slapping out some PowerPoint slides and away you go. There's a fair amount of energy that's required to actually develop and deliver it. We are keen to work with all members, all CMC members, to ensure that they gain the required number of points. And so certainly receptive if any members approach us about delivering a best practices special webinar, certainly keen to recognize that kind of effort, which is significant toward their recertification requirements every year. So really, the sky's the limit in terms of what you might be interested in, what others might be intrigued by, with the recognition that in addition to the satisfaction of actually being able to deliver and share your knowledge with your colleagues and down the road clients and so on and peers, there's an opportunity to gain continued professional development. We're keen to be relatively liberal with awarding continuing professional development points to get our new program off the ground. And this would be one way to really hone and perfect your knowledge in a particular area, and again, share your expertise and gain some points.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I'm thinking that we're not going to have any specific questions. I am getting text feedback that there's nothing additional to cover. So I think you've done a great job, Jon, in terms of covering this off. What I would suggest is we will be publishing this as a YouTube video on our YouTube channel, and that will be circulated to all CMCs and to all members, in fact. So they will have access to this recorded version as a resource. Is it all right if I circulate a PDF of the slides as well?
Certainly, by all means.
Okay, excellent. So we will do that. So that will get that out to the entire membership. And I'm sure if anyone has any questions or ideas, they can email you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll show you as a CC on the email of the notification, and in that way, everyone will be able to contact you directly if they have any specific feedback for you. So, any closing comments for us, Jon?
No, certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about our fledgling professional development program. Every Institute of Management Consulting, as I mentioned before, has one. Despite our unique challenges and opportunities, we're really very, very keen to see this be successful. It will be in very large measure driven by the members. Yes, please CC me on your note to everyone in terms of follow-up. And you can certainly contact me through the CMC Global Institute Secretariat. I'd be pleased to engage in an email conversation with you, Skype conversation. We're keen to enlist volunteers because there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to actually, as I mentioned before, deliver these and to have a successful program. And perhaps in a year's time, we will revisit our professional development program following maybe a survey in the summer of 2018, and we can have a look at how our program has matured. It's going to take a couple of years, and it might be worthwhile to kind of do a year-by-year progress report. So perhaps we can reconnect in the fall of 2018, if not before, about professional development.
Well, excellent. Thank you. And as you say, I know that it takes time to prepare, especially such a well-rounded presentation as you've made. So thank you for all the effort that you've put into this. I know it's well appreciated in terms of people understanding how they can keep their profession up to date and shiny and new. And thank you very much. By way of closing, I would like to let everyone know that our next special webinar will be held on October 3rd. It's at a special time. It'll be held at 8 a.m. Universal Time. Because the speaker is quite a special speaker. He's the immediate past chair of CMC Global, Mr. Tim Miller. He's been involved for many years in his own institute in CMC Australia and also with CMC Global. And he'll be giving us an overview of the 30 years of CMC Global. So it's our 30th anniversary this year. There will be notices going out about that, but I wanted to give you a heads up. So thank you very much all. Thank you for your time. And I hope everyone has an amazing rest of your day, whatever time zone you're in. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.